We're joined now by Congressman Mike Waltz. He's the incoming National Security Advisor to President-elect Donald Trump. Good to have you here.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
I understand just yesterday you were meeting with the families of some of the hostages being held in Gaza. At least 3 Americans assessed to still be alive and in captivity. One of them might not be released until phase 2, when male soldiers are released and Israeli troops withdraw. Will the Trump team see this through to completion?
Well, remember, the terms of the deal that we finally have come to was inherited in many ways from the Biden administration. So it was actually the Biden negotiators that were at the table, and the other side was dealing with them, but kind of looking to us, particularly Steve Witkoff, President Trump's Middle East envoy. And one of the things that we inherited was this framework of women, the elderly, and the sick coming out first. One of the Americans is an Israeli soldier. That means he'll come out in the second phase, but we will get him out. Period. Adon Alexander. And I am convinced, Margaret, that this deal would have never happened had President Trump not been elected. The Trump effect, so to speak. The families believe that. They were effusive in their thanks for him and the truth that he put out that put Hamas on notice that there will be consequences if they don't let our people go.
There is also obviously the party Israel here that feels some pressure to get this done. One far-right member of the Netanyahu government resigned. Another this morning said he will bring down the Netanyahu government if it does not return to fighting in a way that leads Israel to taking over the entire Gaza Strip. Does Mr. Trump support annexation of the West Bank and Gaza?
Well, excuse me, very different things. What we're talking about here is making sure that Hamas is destroyed as a terrorist organization. Hamas is no different than ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any of the worst that has so brutalized the Middle East over the years. And what we have made clear to Bibi Netanyahu, to his government, and I want the Israeli people to hear me loud and clear, if Hamas reneges on this deal, if Hamas backs out, moves the goalpost, what have you, we will support Israel in doing what it has to do, number one. And number two, Hamas will never govern Gaza. That is completely unacceptable because they've made their intention clear, which is to destroy Israel and to have future October 7th. So I understand the concern, but at the end of the day, Prime Minister Netanyahu supported this deal. He agreed we needed to get those hostages out. And within the next 24 hours, we will see 3 women coming out alive and hugging their families. And had we not entered this, these people would have died, Margaret. I mean, these conditions that they were in. By the way, they've been held now longer than the hostages in 1979 in the Iranian hostage crisis. They were being brutalized, raped, tortured. It was horrific. But now we're going to have a Reagan moment. We are going to have President Trump being sworn in as hostages are coming out alive, and that's something we should all celebrate.
You've also said, though, that you want to build on this to eventually get peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, normalization.
That's right.
The price of that is recognition of a Palestinian state, according to Saudi Arabia. Does Mr. Trump support a 2-state solution? Hamas doesn't want 2 states. The far right in Israel doesn't want 2 states. Does Mr. Trump?
Well, President Trump's plan in his first term, his plan for the Middle East and his plan for Israel and Palestine had a pathway to a 2-state with all kinds of very important qualifiers that had to be in place beforehand. Stop radicalizing the next generation of Palestinian youth. Very specifics, components of that plan in terms of how things would be divided up. But I do think we can get to the next round of the Abraham Accords. I do think we can expand it, and that will be between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which will be tremendous. That has been a main goal of the Netanyahu government now for years. And Margaret, I could tell you, for President Trump, if in a short amount of time, if we're talking about infrastructure projects, ports, rails, fiber, data center, if we're talking about all of those things, these historic animosities will become smaller and smaller and smaller. And that is the peace that he seeks and that only he can lead.
So Mr. Huckabee, the possible future ambassador to Israel, is wrong when he says that Mr. Trump does not believe in a two-state solution in the future.
Well, I've spoken
He said that yesterday.
Yeah, no, I've spoken to him, and it's how do we eventually get there, right? And what we eventually want is the Abraham Accords and that next round, right? And there is a lot of room. Both can be true. We are going to protect Israel. We are going to make sure that they are defended. But eventually we're going to come to some accommodation that Saudi Arabia is comfortable in entering into that deal.
To lead to a Palestinian state. That's what
Well, we'll see exactly what that looks like. That process is going to be long.
Yeah.
And what was so interesting about the first administration was that we shifted the dynamics. We brought Israel and the Arab states together because of their mutual concern about Iran and its hegemonic aggression and what the Ayatollahs intended to do. We sat the Palestinian issue aside for a bit, and that is what I think the framework will get back to.
There's a lot to get to, so I want to ask you what we should expect in terms of executive actions in these early days from Mr. Trump.
Oh, well, look, we're going to have his campaign promises that he promised to the American people right out there on the table in terms of border, in terms of energy, in terms of taking on this kind of DEI, woke culture that has infected so many parts of our federal government, including our military, returning us to a meritocracy. He's got a lot in front of him. I'm excited to be a part of it. I can't emphasize enough, though, Margaret, on the border, the American people gave him a clear mandate. Lock down our border, deport the worst of the worst, take on the cartels. We cannot have a situation where we have paramilitary gangs that are shooting down aircraft with heavy weapons, controlling 30% of our neighbor, Mexico, and controlling whole swaths of our border.
You're talking about perhaps an executive order designating cartels as a terrorist group, or
I don't want to get ahead of the announcements, but we have to deal with them with what they are. These are paramilitary organizations with billions at their disposal, with armored vehicles, heavy machine guns that are fighting the Mexican army, not police, army, to a standstill. President Trump was clear on the campaign trail that we're going to take them on, and then we're going to use every resource that we need to defend the American people.
We are seeing in our polling that there is a lot of approval for the president-elect's plan to deport immigrants who are here illegally. But understanding how that works is something I want to ask you. Can you tell us anything about the scope and scale of the roundups that we should expect in these first few days?
Well, I think they're going to be quite aggressive. Number one. Number two, they're going to go after these criminal gangs that are terrorizing our cities, particularly MS-13 and particularly Tren de Agua. Our communities are asking for it. Our neighbors are asking for it.
One of those Tren de Agua is Venezuelan. You can't deport to Venezuela. So where are you going to send those guys?
Well, we're in a number of conversations with a number of countries that will agree to take them.
Okay. So that's a big diplomatic initiative you're part of.
That's right.
TikTok took itself offline at midnight. Because of this national security law that you signed on to as a congressman, which recognizes that TikTok, owned by a Chinese firm, ByteDance, is a national security threat. But on this notice, it says Donald Trump has promised to work with them. If Mr. Trump issues an executive order that bypasses a national security law, isn't this a risk? I mean, how are you going to prevent China from doing what you say they're doing already, which is siphoning up and spying on Americans? Well,
look, I would even point to the author of the law, former Representative Mike Gallagher, who has put out, his goal was never to eliminate TikTok. It was to allow Americans to use it, but then to make it safe from Chinese Communist Party interference.
It was to have an American owner.
Well, right. So what we need between now and Monday is to buy the president some time to evaluate those deals. And if it goes dark, that's going to be obviously extremely problematic. So both can be true. We can have an app that Americans can enjoy, but at the same time that protects their data and protects them from outside influence and undue influence. And that's the time and space that the president is seeking. And as a deal maker, I think we all should be confident that he can craft that kind of a deal.
Have TikTok and ByteDance told you that they're actually interested in selling?
Well, the president spoke with President Xi. Again, very top-down authoritarian system that
you
that
think
he
he's
is
the
in,
ultimate decider.
and they agreed to work together on this.
So President Xi is acknowledging that he has control of ByteDance and TikTok and can force this
Not
through?
explicitly, but I'll tell you, every company in China has, in some way or some form, has to report to or has a member of the Chinese Communist Party on its board.
And must share information at the request of the Chinese Communist Party.
Well, that was the concern of a lot.
And
right?
Tom Cotton is saying that just now, the Republican running the
and
Intelligence
again,
Committee.
you know, the author of the law is saying both can be true. We can have an app that protects Americans. And I could tell you, I wouldn't want the FBI or the US government monitoring every keystroke or seeing every password, nor would we want the Chinese Communist Party. But we also want an app that 170 million Americans clearly really enjoy, and that we were able to get our message out during the Trump campaign in a very powerful way.
So you believe that an American owner will emerge and a deal will be done?
I don't want to get ahead
days.
of President Trump on the deal, but he is definitely wanting to have the time right now, which would mean an extension, to evaluate the deals that are on the table.
Okay. The Republican head of the Intelligence Committee says the law wouldn't allow for that, because you need to show that there was
no, actually, the law
progress.
says if there's a viable deal on the table,
exactly,
right? I know
You're
of at
saying there
least,
is a viable deal?
I know of at least one from Kevin O'Leary that's been delivered to ByteDance. The point is, what is a viable deal?
Exactly.
The president needs the time with the Department of Justice to evaluate what viable means. We can't do that if the thing is completely dark.
And you'll be on the job starting at noon Monday.
Honor of my life. Thanks so much.
Mike Waltz, thank you.